What a great way to spend a Sunday morning. Listen, seriously, I cannot thank you enough for welcoming me into your home. It's never easy because you don't know kind of the congregation and you don't know me. So I figured we'd spend 30 minutes just kind of getting to know each other. But it is an honor, and I was sitting over there and just I need to say this because I'm led to say this, and that is for whomever needs to hear this today. It's not how you start; it's about how you finish. And I was sitting over there just thinking, and I know I needed to kind of just share that. It's always about how we finish, right? Because our starts are always, they may not be, like if we could go back and script them, how many of you, because I could definitely say this about me, my start would not be how I would go back and write it. Anybody? Right? But the great news is that we get to, right, through the power and the grace and the love of God, we get to dictate how we finish. We get to write that every single day. And what I'm going to share today is just some things that I have learned that have helped me along the way to get to, my finish, my desire, the thing that drives me every day is when my life ends, I want a pat on the back or the pat on the backside from God saying, good game. Anybody relate to that? Right? Good game, well played, right? Because tomorrow, right, we all know this is not promised for any of us. Always about today and what we get to do with that. So a little of our story, my wife TJ, who was going to be here with me today but couldn't, we live in Palm Bay, but we've been in Florida for November will be 20 years. And we started in Port St. Lucie and worked our way down to Palm Beach. And so we just like to move, right? Like it's just, we kind of move around a lot, but Palm Bay is where we're going to be for a while. But our story is, how it goes along dictates obviously how it's going to end, but where it started was certainly not this. I'm Jewish by heritage, believe it or not, and God got a hold of me at 25, changed my life completely, gave my life to Christ, and I started out as a high school music teacher. I was in public school education for 10 years up in New York and Connecticut, and anybody relate to, you're kind of like life is kind of what it is. You're going along and, right, this is how it is and this is what I'm going to be, and you kind of plan it out. Can anybody relate to that? Right? And so drilled into my head was go to school, get good grades, get a good job, work there 30 or 40 years. One day, like that was just drilled into my head. And I have a passion for teaching, so I thought, okay, I'm going to be a public school teacher. And then along the way, 27 married, 28 house, 29 daughter, 32 master's degree, 33 son. Like in 6 years, the box, right, that you're, that's where we were in Connecticut. And I went to my pastor around 33. It was when our second child, Ethan, our two kids now are 24 and 20. Amen. But every day I need to hear that. So, when Ethan was born and he went into daycare and our daughter Sophia was in daycare and my wife was working, and I just thought, this was not what I thought it would all be. Can anybody kind of relate to, you start and you have goals and then you get there and you're like, wait a minute, this is not what I thought it would be. Right. So I went to my pastor at the time and I said, I don't know, something's off. And he handed me a book that changed my life. And everything I talk about really comes out of a lot of that book and the impact that it had on my life. But if I wasn't in fellowship with my pastor, the lives that have been changed over the last 20 years would never have happened. So he handed me a book called Wild at Heart. Anybody familiar with that book? Phenomenal book, written for men. That book got a hold of me. God got a hold of me. And shortly thereafter, we packed everything up, came here to Florida, and said, okay, God, what do you want? And the last 20 years has been living out that calling. So that's just a little bit of our story. But all of the decisions that we made are a result of a strong circle, what I call your posse. Right? Because people call it your tribe, your mastermind, your circle. I call it your posse, right? Because there's power in your posse. Anybody relate, right? Okay, so we're going to dive into that a little bit. But I want to start with scripture verse that kind of dictates my whole talk, which is, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. How many of you heard that or read that before?
All the time.
We're going to unpack that today because there's so much power in that proverb. And I love, love, love Psalms and Proverbs. Love them. I read them every single day. There's so much power in them. So it is absolutely vital that we have the right people in our circle. Vital. Okay? And really, how do we make sure? So the question I have for you is, are you aware of your level of awareness? Now, I like to ask questions that like have the answers inside of them, right? Or I'll ask a question, people like, I like this, huh? That's one of them. Are you aware of your level of awareness? Okay, and what I mean by that is, you know, what is awareness? What are we really kind of thinking about? So awareness, the definition of it, is knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. The example I gave in my book was two people. I was a big Starbucks guy pre-COVID. Post-COVID, I like Aldi coffee. Okay? Right? But I would, you know, imagine two people are sitting at a coffee shop and a bomb goes off. Two people sitting in the same event will have two very different perceptions and stories of what happened. Yes? Okay? So our knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. So if that's the case about our awareness level, our awareness dictates who we surround ourselves with. When I was a school teacher, who did I surround myself with? Other teachers, everybody that kind of lived in the same house, drove the same kind of car, thought the same thing, right? My circle reflected really my awareness level. And our awareness also dictates how we perceive the outside world. See, in that event at Starbucks, like I'm talking about, the perception of both people has everything to do with everything they had seen and heard and experienced up to that moment. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So, think about it this way. Think back to, you know, we've been in Florida in November, it'll be 20 years. So think back to who you were 20 years ago. Remember, it's not how you start, right? It's how you finish. So, how many of you, raise your hand, do you agree that we may think differently than we did 10 or 20 years ago? Right? Okay? And the chances are that we don't think the same way we did because of every bit of life that has happened since those moments. True? The point is that as life happens, we learn, we grow. The challenge is, are we making changes that go along with what we're learning? Okay? So how do we accelerate the process, right? Because I truly believe, how much closer, here's my question, can we get to God and the meaning of being a Christian? How close can we get if we raised our awareness level faster than just randomly going along? If it was a conscious thought, let me grow, let me change, let me develop, right? How much closer can I get? And I truly believe life is a journey on how close we can get to the Father. Right? Every day, right? Can I get closer? Can I get better? And I think awareness level is a part of that. So I remember hearing this question. Wait a minute. Let me make sure I'm okay. You can go to the next slide, right? On hearing about our thoughts. And I had never really kind of thought about what I'm thinking about, okay? But our thoughts are energy. Our thoughts always seek out like-minded thinking. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Our thoughts always seek out like-minded thinking. We want to relate. We want to connect. So who do we talk to? People that can relate to who we relate to or what we're thinking about. Yes? Right? So I share this because the journey that our family has been on over 20 years literally has transformed and grown because we're always thinking about what we're thinking about. We attract those that have the same energy and think the same way. So, I had heard this quote. You can go to the next slide. You are the average of the 5 people you spend your time with. And the first time I had heard that quote, I literally was like, okay, well, who's around me? What am I thinking about? What's happening for my world? So the question is, what's the conversation, right? If you stop and you think about, okay, where am I? What's the conversation going on around me? My question for you, as you can put up the next slide, would be, is the conversation positive or negative? So I want to pause here before we dive into this, because I always want to make sure that the message is pointing to the Father. What do you think God wants for our lives? Positive or negative? Positive. But you would agree that, right, we live in a physical world that's not always positive. Things happen, right? Right? But the true goal, right, is to get closer to God and be, live a positive life. Like, that's what we want the outcome to be, right? Because, and I love, I always have to remind myself that there's no condemnation in the love of Christ. That again, and I wasn't even planned this today, but it's not how we start, it's how we finish. That as we go along the way, it might not always be positive. But we've got to keep our mind anchored in a positive result. So the conversation that's happening around us, is it positive or is it negative? Are good things happening or bad things happening? Now, I got to tell you personally, the beginning of this year was so not what I had planned for the beginning of the year to be. Right? Anybody start? New Year's is always fun, right? It's like, all right, this is what's going to happen. This year I'm going to do this. And then life happens. And life certainly happened for our family over the first quarter. Nothing that we had planned. But in the middle of adversity, even though negative things might be happening, my question is, what's the conversation while it's happening? Is it faith-filled, love-filled, or is it the other? Okay? Is there gossiping, or is there understanding? I remember hearing one time, somebody had challenged me and said, have the radical assumption that people are doing the best that they can do. That was a good check. Have the radical assumption that people are doing the best that they can do. Right? And so when things do happen, how are we processing it? And more importantly, in our circle around us, how is it being processed by them? Is there praising and blessing, or is there condescending and condemnation? Something to think about, right? Okay, and I have it here somewhere, but it was, I remember hearing the question, think about what you're thinking about. And I remember hearing that going, what does that mean? Anybody ever hear that before? Think about what you're thinking. What am I supposed to do? Stop and think about what I'm... No. Like, just think about what you're thinking about, which is why I highly recommend and practice every single day. And I've been doing it literally since we moved here to Florida. I did not do it prior to moving here, but somebody in my posse at that time recommended get in the Word every day. And being in the Word every day helps you think about what you're thinking about. So we hear all the time, well, I don't have time. Think about this. If everybody in your circle of influence was in the Word every day, talking about being in the Word every day, what likely habit would we pick up? Being in the Word every day, right? Because everybody around us does it. So that's a clear example, right? The only reason that happened for me and why I speak about it so much is somebody in my circle recommended the same thing. And really, a lot of people were. It was like, oh, I guess we better do that. Because they were where we wanted to be, faith-wise, life-wise. Okay? So here's some biblical examples of really of strong circles. Okay? And a circle, right, could be two people. Or it could be much bigger. We'll talk about that. But Moses had Aaron, Joshua, and Caleb. So when Moses was talking, right, with his circle, those were the men in his circle. If you're familiar with the story of Ruth, Ruth chose to follow Naomi. But Naomi had Ruth. I don't think either one of their lives would have been the same if they weren't together. David had his mighty men. There were 30 of them, but did you know that out of the 30, there were 3 that were really close? Okay, and then Jesus had the 12. How many of you, I'm just curious, have seen The Chosen? Not powerful? Right? And such a great representation of what we're talking about, of having that circle and having that influence. So what I wanted to share today and what I've learned over time certainly is that the church, you guys, and I have to tell you, right? I've obviously been to many churches. This church is the best example of a strong posse, of a strong circle. You can see it and feel it, right, in everything that you just did before I got up here. I'm sitting there going, wow, I feel like I'm in a living room, right? And that's what you want, right? That's exactly right. Who said that? That's what we're going for. Right? There you go. It's perfect, right? So congratulations on that, right? But a church is a posse with smaller groups in it. It's a posse with little posse. True? Okay. By the way, I'm an ex-high school teacher. I need feedback. Okay? Feedback is good, okay? And my coach, so I have a coach. He's a pastor. He's a great guy. Dr. Dave White, if you ever want to look him up, unbelievable guy. But one thing that he shared with me when I told him I had the honor of speaking with you today, he said, Jesus didn't call us to a life of weekly independent living to only get in group every Sunday. Let me say that again. He did not call us to a week of independent living to spend an hour on Sunday. He called us to be in fellowship and to go much deeper, right? And that posse matters, right? When we step out of here on a Sunday, who do we hang around with? Are we keeping people around us that are in our circle? And the reason why I think this is important is because the biggest, that you could maybe hold off on that slide for a minute. The biggest attack of the church in our time was COVID-19. Because what better way to attack than separate? That's exactly right. And I don't think the church has recovered from that event. It's changed, right? It will transform. It will recover because it is the Church of Jesus Christ. But it has changed. And I do absolutely think that that is attacked. So why is all of this incredibly, incredibly important? And the answer to that is, you can put up Wireprod, there you go. So 1 Peter 5:8 says, stay alert, watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour.
Comes in all forms.
All forms. It doesn't say, be at ease. It doesn't say, don't pay attention. It says what? Stay
Alert.
alert. Alert. In 2012, a friend of mine, and it's amazing how this statement has stuck with me since she said it. She said to me, and I want you to think back 10 years ago, or it's over 10 years, it's 11 years ago now. Think about where we were technology-wise, where we were. Just 2012 is, for me, it's like, and that wasn't that long ago, but it's 11 years ago. She said to me, I asked her, I said, why are you involved in the technology space in which you are? And she said, I believe the attack of the enemy will come in ones and zeros. Right? And if you know what that means is coding is in ones and zeros. And what that said to me was the attack was going to come through technology, and now think about where social media and technology are today. Crazy, right? In 2011, the Napoleon Hill, if you know who Napoleon Hill is, he's an author, he's in the kind of personal development space, but the Napoleon Hill Foundation released a book called Outwitting the Devil in 2011, and that book had been hidden for 83 years. Because it was written in the early 1900s, his family and they just believed that that book would be too controversial to be released. And I've read that book multiple times, and I just want to set the premise, even though the quote's up there. What Napoleon Hill did in that book is he basically took all the negative energy that makes up a person or makes up the world and literally conducted an interview, that he's interviewing the devil. And the things that are said in that book, I'm personally watching play out today. So I wanted to share some of this because I think it has everything to do with who we surround ourselves with. In the book, he says, my greatest weapon over human beings consists of two secret principles for which I gain control of their minds. I will speak first of the principle of habit, through which I silently enter the minds of people. By operating through this principle, I establish, I wish I could avoid using this word, the habit of drifting. When a person begins to drift on any subject, he is headed straight towards the gates of what you earthbound call hell.
That's right.
Wow. So I had to do a self-check. What is drifting? And am I present in my life, in the world, with my family, in my business? Am I with God? Am I present or am I drifting? The other thing he says is a drifter is one who permits himself to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of his own mind. He would rather let me occupy his mind and do his thinking than go to the trouble of thinking for himself. What I would add to that, or is being in the Word. A drifter is one who accepts whatever life throws their way without making a protest or putting up a fight, does not know what he wants from life, and spends all of his time getting just that. A drifter has lots of opinions, but they are not his own. Most of them are supplied by me. And I share this with you because I'm extremely, extremely passionate about what is happening to families in our society. The messaging, social media, what's happening with men and the calling on men, what we are divinely created for and to be. And I see all of this playing out in a world that is, to me, assaulting God. Now, I don't think a devil is around every corner, but I do know we do live in a sinful, physical world, and we need to be on our guard. Can anybody agree with that? So let's talk about social media. I believe social media is the enemy's greatest weapon. And I could share with you tons of stories from my own personal journey to attest to that. We don't have the time, or this is the space, but I will talk about it at my conference. But when we drift, we're not present. And when we go on our devices, we're not present. And so if that's the case, then we drift every time we do it. So how many of you have anybody been in a restaurant where you see a family sitting at a table and all of them have their heads in a screen? They're not present. They're not present. I'll share a very personal story with you. This is obviously pre-technology and pre-social media. But my father, he passed away in 2008. He was 63. I was 38. And I had lost probably the greatest influence in my life. And one of the things that I just could not get off of at the time was wondering if he was proud of me. And when I would share that with family members, they would go, "He said it all the time." And what I come to realize is I didn't hear it. And the reason why I didn't hear it is I wasn't present when he did. Not physically. Even though he said it to me while I was right there in my own mind, I wasn't present. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Right? I've seen with my own children, right? They're maybe, right, playing a game or whatever, and I'm like, all right, I love you, I'm leaving. Did they hear it? Who knows? But look at what's happening today on how much time we spend with a device on our hand looking at a screen. And more importantly, being on social apps. Social media has become most people's Posse. But it's one that is the antithesis of everything that a strong circle represents. We're watching a generation build community or their circle in a world that doesn't exist. I have learned from my own personal journey that there are a lot of people that are in my past that before Facebook or connecting with them, there was a reason why we didn't connect. Having them back in my reality doesn't necessarily mean that's a good thing. Okay? So I think we just need to disengage as much as we can. So I will share this because I do practice what I preach. I believe in integrity is a big thing with me. Social media, for me, it doesn't work well. There are triggers that happen for it for me, right, through just my past. And I have been off Facebook, though I have a presence on Facebook, and I will tell everybody here, if you connect with me on Facebook or Instagram, it's not managed by me. I don't even have the password, right? I say, hey, post this, right? Hey, I did some good barbecue, throw that up on Facebook, or hey, we got a new dog, put that up, but I don't actually do it because me going on there, I drift. So I'm here to tell you that it's just not being good, right? And my marriage and my family is also a part of that posse. My wife was like, it's not good, right? We need to get rid of it. And sure, it doesn't work well for us. So,
I get King James daily scriptures.
What's that?
And I get King James daily scriptures every morning, every night. And I get scriptures that just pop up. And sometimes it's right what I needed to hear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the apps that I did put on my phone was, anybody ever hear of the book Jesus Calling? Right? I went and I got the app, right? And I read that every day, right? So we can fill that space with things that help our mindset and get rid of the things that don't. So a positive, faith-filled posse, one, keeps us grounded in our faith. Again, think about the conversation. Okay, number two, they keep us pointed in the right direction. Remember I shared, it's not how you start, it's always about how we finish. Well, is our circle helping us point in the right direction? One of the things I personally love to do is with my circle, I put out there the things that I want to do. Because I need someone to hold me accountable. Anybody? Right? Can anybody agree? Right? I know if I tell Mike Briggs, who is one of my brothers, if I tell Mike Briggs, hey, Mike, I'm doing X, Y, Z, I know he's going to ask. The last thing I want to do is give excuses as to why that didn't happen. So our posse keeps us pointed in the right direction. It holds us accountable to our goals like I'm talking about, but it also provides strength when we're weak. I mean, yesterday, it's like Mike Briggs time. He called me up yesterday. He goes, how you doing? And I said, I'm nervous, right? I'm walking into a strange place, don't know, right? But you all make me feel incredibly comfortable, by the way. I hope I'm doing a good job. Is everything okay? Yeah, we'll check up, right? But Mike, he's like, brother, and he just poured out into me, and I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to go, right? And he helped me get where I needed to be. But also our posse says what needs to be said, even when it's tough to do so. Here's when you know you have the right people in your circle, when you don't like what they say, but you know it's the truth. Right? One of the easiest examples of that is a marriage. My wife and I have been married, June 28th will be 26 years, which we are proud of, right? Because we've done a lot of work, right? We've done a lot of work. But when TJ, when she says things to me and I know she's right, anybody in a marriage long enough, you go, yes, honey. Okay. And you go in the closet, right? And you come out and you get done what needs to get done, right? That's not just for men, that's for women too. All right, so why am I sharing all this and what does this have to do with next weekend? So, in 2015, I had the unique and unbelievable privilege that when we came here to Florida, I got into a business that allowed me to mentor and coach people. I've been mentoring and coaching people really since I was a teacher, so for about 25, 26 years. And I would work in a business, I would develop people for business, and anything, you get into people's lives. And I saw, it was probably around 2015, that I started to see a shift. And that shift was, and I'll share this for everyone because it's a part of every walk that we have in our faith, in our family, and finances, and everything. There always comes a point where everything you know and everything that you are is not enough to get you to the next level. Anybody relate to that? Anybody face that moment? Whatever it is that's the barrier, I need to, I call it, man up already. And that's not right? I think that man up term in our society today has been tarnished greatly. What that means is, I have to dig deep. I have to pull out something that I haven't used to get me to the next place. And I'm probably going to need help in doing it. And in 2015, I started to notice a shift between men and women when they hit that point. And it blew me away. I saw a lot of men shrink from that moment and a lot of women kick into another gear. And I started to ask why. And in 2018, I wrote a book called Man Up Already. And that was all what I believe that men, especially, that we should live our lives on what I call the 4 pillars: integrity, humility, authenticity, and morality. And that if we keep those as the foundation, we're going to live a good life. We're going to help a lot of people. Those things matter. And so the book led to a podcast. So if you're in a podcast, there's the Man Up Already podcast. And after COVID, I kept being challenged, do an event. And finally this year, I said, okay, let's do a conference. And so that conference is next Saturday at the Mid-Florida Event Center in Port St. Lucie. And we're excited by it. So I want to talk about just kind of, if you look at the concept of manhood, I think manhood, the biblical concept of manhood, is under attack today like never before. Period. If you take out men, you take out families, you take out communities, like it's that important. Anybody agree? Okay. But I do know that men need to be encouraged and they need to fellowship with other men. I know that from my own personal experience, every year I would go to something called Band of Brothers in Colorado, in the mountains of Colorado, which is unbelievable. But men need to fellowship with other men. It's not about, and I don't mean to offend anyone here, but I just see so many things that we do for men that say, let's have a barbecue or let's do this. And that's not enough for the work that needs to get done. Men have to be in fellowship with men, and it needs to be out there, really, in adventure. Let me give you a great example. Mike Briggs came into my business. We went into business together in 2011 is when we met. And I didn't know Mike very well, and we would see each other every week, and we would get to know each other, but we got a crazy idea, I, and a bunch of other people, to go to Atlanta to a meeting. And so it was spur of the moment. We rented a car, and we took a road trip from Palm Beach to Atlanta. And that was the first time I had spent time with Mike, and we were on the road. And that's when Mike Briggs came into my circle. That's when I got to know him, experience him, right? And we have been brothers all this time. We have walked life together. But I don't think that would have happened if it was safe and contained in an office. It was because we went out on adventure. So get men outdoors, get them in a boat, get them in the mountains, right? Give them adventure, and you will see fellowship around the fire afterwards. That's how it's done. So the conference next week is really our way of saying, let's get men in a room and give them some things to think about. One thing I can share with you in the work that I do is I know that I don't have the answers. That's not what I proclaim. I know I have experiences and I share what I've learned along the way. Because I think that if we start to share our journey with each other without fear of condemnation and judgment, and we start to offer up, hey, here's what I've learned or here's what I've experienced, you're going to build community and you're going to build that posse. Make sense? So, you have, I guess you guys had put the QR code that takes you to a website, Man Up Already. It's really, right, I do things really complicated. It's like Man Up Already for everything, okay? So it's pretty easy. Book, Man Up Already, the podcast. The website is manupalready.com. Tickets are $25. It's from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's only 5 hours. We've got incredible, incredible speakers. You're going to learn a ton. It is for men only. I've had women say they're going to sneak in, but it is, right? It's for men only. And it's going to be an awesome, awesome day. An awesome day. We're really, really excited. So I highly encourage, I think, Jimmy, you said that your men's group is going to that. So it's going to be awesome. But with that, I would just highly encourage you today, just think about what you're thinking about. Think about who you're thinking with. Who's in that circle? What are the habits daily that we can get into to grow? Because I know this for everybody. The more we grow, the more we reflect Christ, not only right inside, but outside. We change. If there's one thing I have learned, it's this. The more we grow inside, we transform everything around us. And boy, does the world need strong, faith-based, family-oriented people to go out there and speak up. Right? That's what's required for us. So thank you so much for bringing me into your home today. I can't tell you how honored I am, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you.